The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by demerarawaves.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The Speaker of the National Assembly has thrown out an opposition motion that was aimed at sending 22 government parliamentarians to a disciplinary committee. The People's National Congress Reform has discarded a motion by a party group in West Berbice for the removal of Joseph Harmon from the National Assembly. In the region, a former top official of Suriname's central bank has been jailed for financial crimes. And you'll be getting your latest bulletin of the international news coming from the BBC. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir on Monday scuttled a plan by the opposition, a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change, APNU plus AFC, to send 22 government parliamentarians to a parliamentary disciplinary committee for the raucous behavior in the National Assembly's chamber.
First, the motion will not proceed because a prima facie case has not been established. And secondly, there is, I was told, only reminded this morning, because I'm surrounded by so many lawyers, and in the House we have many lawyers on both sides of excellent repute. You can't bring a legal action for your illegal actions in the first place. And based on those two, I am not allowing that motion to go ahead.
Mr. Nadir made known his decision on the motion 1 week after he gave the green light for a government-sponsored motion for 8 opposition parliamentarians to be sent to the Privileges Committee for the December 29, 2021 chaos. Opposition parliamentarian Annette Ferguson has already publicly admitted grabbing the mace because she had become so frustrated that the government had refused to consider requests by civil society and the opposition for debate on the new Natural Resource Fund legislation to be pushed back. The People's National Congress Reform's Central Executive Committee, CEC, on Sunday by a majority refused to consider a motion for the removal of Mr. Joseph Harmon from the National Assembly. The aim had been to make way for party leader Aubrey Norton to become Guyana's opposition leader, despite a stout official denial by that party. The sources said 31 of the 35 CEC members spoke about the motion, while the others remained silent, and in the end, they decided not to act on the document that originated from a PNCR group in West Berbice. Demerara Waves / News Talk Radio Guyana was informed that the motion, which had originally contained 4 names, was subsequently amended to focus on only one person. The PNCR, however, in an official statement, referred to a list of MPs and 4 of its MPs in describing media reports to that effect as a total fabrication. That party went on to say that no such motion had been submitted by Region 5 and no such motion has been discussed at the party's Central Executive Committee meeting on Sunday. The sources said that the PNCR leader would this week hold discussions with 9 PNCR-aligned parliamentarians of the opposition coalition, a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change, APNU plus AFC, to convince at least one of them to resign. If he succeeds, the sources say this will make way for him to be formally picked to become a parliamentarian and then go on to be elected by a majority of the opposition parliamentarians as opposition leader. 1,000 houses are to be built using 100% local wood. President Irfaan Ali says the aim is to provide affordable homes to Guyanese. He says the project forms part of the value added to the government's housing program. This year, over $12 billion has been allocated for continued infrastructural development works in housing schemes. The works will include the upgrading of more than 45 kilometers of roads in 31 existing housing areas across regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. Guyana now has 11,527 active COVID cases. The Ministry of Health says they include 203 who are hospitalized. 16 of them are very sick and are receiving intensive care. The Health Ministry also says that there are 353 new cases within the past 24 hours. Doctors have ordered 11,324 persons to isolate themselves at home as they can easily spread the virus that has killed 1,166 persons in Guyana so far. Dating back to March 2020, when the first case was detected in Guyana, 59,803 persons have been tested positive. Those who have recovered so far total 47,094. Police and firefighters are today continuing their investigations into a fire that destroyed a building at the Guyana National Shipping Corporation GNSC wharf on Lombard Street. The fire service says a workshop and gear room, which were housed in the same building on the premises, were destroyed on Sunday morning. Fire Chief Gregory Wickham says a fireman aboard the fireboat spotted the smoke and called for help. The Fire Prevention Department is slated to conduct fire prevention inspections later this week with GNSC. The Guyana Fire Service says this will be done with the aim of putting ample passive and active fire suppression systems in place to prevent and reduce the outbreak of fires at these facilities. Meanwhile, Minister of Home Affairs says that the business community and the wider public need to be on greater alert.
We perhaps have to work harder at getting the message across, in spite of the fact that we've had serious fires of recent. All right.
What is your word of advice at this point in time, given the 2 fires in close proximity?
Well, I can only repeat what is in front of us, what is happening fairly regularly now. The fact that we have to pay more attention to issues relating to fire safety and to protecting the personal property, private businesses, and also public buildings.
This is the second fire in recent weeks at a city wharf. The first was at a bond, the GNIC wharf that housed the park and bond and customs operations there. The Guyana Police Force says that 71 illegal guns were taken off the streets last year. That law enforcement agency says that those guns had been in the hands of criminals. Official figures also show that 9 illegal guns have been recovered so far for this year. Police announced the number of guns recovered last year while reporting that a 22-year-old man was arrested allegedly with an unlicensed .32 pistol, 1 magazine, and 2 live rounds of ammunition in his possession. According to police, the man was arrested on Sunday during an operation at Hammerhead Street, Caneville, East Bank, Demerara. Investigators are expected to question him about a series of armed robberies in Georgetown. Now for the news in the region. A former top official of Suriname's central bank was today sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for financial crimes. Star News reports that ex-director Legal Compliance and International Affairs also has to pay a fine of almost $4,800. If she does not pay the fine, she will have to serve an additional 10 months imprisonment. Judge Singh says that the ex-director of Legal Compliance and International Affairs is guilty of violating the Anti-Corruption Act. The court found that there was close and conscious cooperation between her and the other suspects. Prior to today's sentencing, she has been on remand for 13 months. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown says elections will be held this year. He made this announcement on his radio station, Point FM, at the weekend. Mr. Brown says his Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party is aiming to defeat the opposition United Progressive Party by a landslide.
I want the people of Antigua and Barbuda to know, especially those who support us and our well-wishers, that is all 17 seats we're going for next election. Absolutely. We must absolutely says next elections.
The United Progressive Party has already launched its election campaign. Colombian President Ivan Duque says his government will establish a regional solidarity fund to serve the population in health and in case of natural disasters. He made those remarks during the second ministerial summit of the Caribbean community in Barranquilla. The meeting focused on economic reactivation, health, climate change, and gender equality. Belize's Foreign Minister Eamon Courtenay, who chairs the CARICOM Council, as well as Secretary General Carla Barnett, attended the meeting. The Colombian leader told the CARICOM delegation that his country wants to strengthen the bond of cooperation on security. The Barranquilla meeting reviewed the agreements signed in Cartagena de Indias on June 29, 2019. The Colombian president also expressed concern about natural disasters and vaccination against COVID-19, in addition to economic and security reactivation. He added that once his country starts producing vaccines against the new coronavirus disease COVID-19 in the next 12 months, he hoped that Colombia and CARICOM could have a partnership. A seismologist at the Seismic Research Unit of the University of the West Indies says Trinidad and Tobago is not expected to face some more serious earthquakes. He gave the assurance after last Saturday's quake between the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Details from this TTT News Online report.
Lead seismologist of the Seismology Unit of the UWI's Seismic Research Center, Dr. Rodrigo Contreras, confirms Saturday's incident was not the first for this week.
The first two events of the week, they were felt, but not as widely as the one. The magnitudes were actually larger than the one, but they were located in an area a little bit farther from the island.
He says the quake was located between the islands of Trinidad and Tobago.
There is no evidence that something larger will come. Maybe we will feel some shakings, but there is no evidence that something will produce like buildings to collapse and stuff like that.
Dr. Cantera says many persons commented on Saturday morning's event via the center's Facebook page, but he urged them to fill out the felt earthquake form on the site instead, as this will allow the center to gather more accurate data on the earthquake. Terry Ann Brown-Campbell, TTT News.
And lastly, in the region, police in Trinidad are investigating an incident in which 4 Chinese nationals were arrested and more than $1 million worth of illegal drugs and a quantity of cash were confiscated during a drug bust. The Caribbean Media Corporation reports that the incident took place last week during an intelligence-led exercise which was conducted in the Northern Division. The police report that during the exercise, a search warrant for firearms and ammunition was executed at a residence located in the community of Trincity to the east of there. During a search of the premises, officers allegedly found and seized 201 glass vials, each labeled along with 76 Ziploc packets, each containing a white crystal-like substance resembling the dangerous drug ketamine. Ketamine is described as a mind-altering drug, has often used to help people suffering from anxiety and depression. Jaishing Jiang, 26, was arrested and subsequently charged with possession of ketamine for the purpose of trafficking. And here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
This is Julie Candler with the BBC News. A report into parties at the office of the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there were failures of leadership and judgment by both Downing Street and the Cabinet Office. The senior civil servant who authored the report, Sue Gray, found that some events should not have been allowed to take place, other events should not have been allowed to develop as they did. She notes that some of the behaviour was difficult to justify and there was excessive consumption of alcohol. Victoria Derbyshire has some of the report's findings.
At times there was too little thought given to what was happening across the country, i.e. what the rest of the country had to do when it came to lockdowns and restrictions. Failures of leadership, failures of judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. And critically, some staff wanted to raise the alarm. Some staff wanted to raise concerns about behaviours they witnessed at work, but they didn't feel they could.
The United Nations Security Council is meeting shortly to discuss the tensions between Russia and Ukraine as international efforts to de-escalate the crisis continue. The meeting comes at the request of the United States. Caroline Davis is in Moscow.
In terms of how it's likely to affect the mood, it's probably unlikely to really improve much of the mood between Russia and America. So America called this meeting because it says that Russia's actions are threatening international peace and security. Now, Russia's made its view on the fact that this meeting's happening quite clear as well. One of their representatives tweeted on Friday that this was a PR stunt. In his words, he couldn't recall another occasion when a Security Council member proposed to discuss its own, again, his words, baseless allegations and assumptions of a threat to international order from someone else.
A rights group has urged the Egyptian authorities to reveal the whereabouts of a man linked to the Muslim Brotherhood who's been accused of involvement in violent attacks. Hossam Manoufi Salam was detained earlier this month at an airport in Egypt. Sebastian Usher reports.
The plane Hossam Manoufi Salam was travelling on was on its way from Khartoum to Istanbul. The direct flight made an unscheduled landing at the airport in Luxor. The official reason was that the smoke detection system had gone off. Hossam Manoufi was last seen in the custody of security officials. Human Rights Watch has called for the legal basis of his arrest to be disclosed. The Egyptian media has reported that Mr. Manoufi is a leading figure in the so-called Hassam Group, an armed faction believed to be a breakaway of the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. His family and supporters say that he was a known supporter of the Brotherhood, but deny that he was involved with Hassam.
Reports from central Nigeria say armed men have killed dozens of people in attacks in several areas. They say hundreds of bandits on motorcycles attacked villages in Niger State. The gunmen also abducted several people. The attackers overpowered local security staff before ransacking homes and setting houses on fire. World News from the BBC. A court in Burkina Faso has suspended the trial of the alleged killers of the revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara, who was assassinated in 1987. Mr. Sankara's family asked for the suspension following last week's coup. They said they wanted it to resume once constitutional order had been restored. A British woman who'd alleged she'd been gang raped in Cyprus has won an appeal there against a subsequent conviction for public mischief. The woman had been given a 4-month suspended sentence after retracting her initial allegation that she'd been raped. Anna Holligan reports.
There were hugs and smiles of relief as the verdict was read out. The woman's mother, watching in the UK, said she hoped her daughter's suffering would at least bring positive changes in the way that victims of crime were treated. She was a teenager on a summer break before university when she said she was raped by a group of tourists. Days later, following intense police questioning, she withdrew the allegation and was subsequently found guilty of public mischief for reporting a fake crime.
A representative of the Roman Catholic Church in Germany has urged the former Pope, Benedict XVI, to apologise for his failings in a child abuse scandal. The head of the German Conference of Catholic Bishops said Pope Emeritus Benedict had to acknowledge that he made mistakes. Earlier this month, a report by German lawyers found that when he was the Archbishop of Munich, Benedict allowed a priest who was known to be a paedophile to work in his diocese. Pope Francis has offered words of encouragement to one of the least loved trades, tax collectors. Receiving a delegation from Italy's revenue agency, the Pope said everyone had to pay their fair share so that the weakest and poorest in society were not crushed by the powerful. Pope Francis also told the delegation that tax collectors had a patron saint in heaven, St. Matthew, who was himself employed as a tax collector. BBC News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. The Speaker of the National Assembly has thrown out an opposition motion that was aimed at sending 22 government parliamentarians to a disciplinary committee. The party's National Congress Reform has discarded a motion by a party group in West Berbice for the removal of Joseph Harmon from the National Assembly. And in the region, a former top official of Suriname's central bank has been jailed for financial crimes. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.